the fundamental division in the United States now is no longer between left and right, but rather between those who have faith in institutions and those who are just skeptical about the efficacy of those institutions, government, media, higher education, even science. So it's a long preface to the answer to your question. You can have a couple of different reactions if you are one of those anti-institutionalists or one of the people that has lost faith in institutions, anger or apathy. Anger is what we saw in Charlottesville and at the Capitol. And frankly, that's sort of easier to manage or easier to respond to, or apathy. And to me, that's a lot more insidious and harder to combat. I worry that there are a lot of people in this country who have sort of lost faith in those systems who don't charge the Capitol. They just disengage. They just they don't vote. They don't educate themselves. They don't talk to their neighbors. They sort of stop caring and participating. And that gives outsized authority to people with perspectives that are not quite as sort of mainstream or for the common good. And that worries me. So the bottom line of the book is fight apathy, right? Stay engaged. Democracy comes down to people willing to raise their hand and do the right thing. All of us need to do that if we're going to protect this thing called democracy. I actually think there's some legitimacy to the lack of faith in our government's ability to solve problems. I too am frustrated with that. And when I look at the reasons for that, I think unfortunately that the rules are designed right now to protect incumbency, much more so than to create a climate in which there's constructive discussion or compromise. I live in the 5th district of Virginia, which is gerrymandered to be a very Republican leaning district. Even though I live in Charlottesville, much like State College, progressive liberal college town, it is my district. It's very, very difficult for any Democrat to win because of the way it's drawn. And the same thing happens in safe Democratic districts that are drawn to be safely Democratic. As a result of that gerrymandered system, the only way you lose if you're incumbent is outflanked to the extreme. If there's someone more conservative or more liberal, and that discourages people listening to each other, talking about hard issues and compromising. And when you add on top of that, the incessant flow of special interest money that again largely goes to incumbents, it just makes it really difficult for those systems. And this happens both in Washington and it happens in state legislatures. It makes it very difficult for those legislative bodies to really work to solve, problems of gun violence and immigration and climate change and all these really pressing issues that we have. But I understand anger at the system. I understand that cynicism. And we can't wait for government to heal itself. That's why I turn in the book to these more organic solutions. That's what it's going to take because, again, the rules don't facilitate real reform with our elected officials.
So what are opportunities for pushback here? What can the other parts of government do? Are there things that can happen outside of the three branches of government to try to act as a check on some of these actions?
Yeah, there have already been a lot of lawsuits filed challenging some of the steps that the president has taken. He issued an order, for example, eliminating birthright citizenship. It is in the Constitution that if you are born in the United States, you are a citizen. And a federal judge in Seattle has already enjoined enforcement of that new rule. I think some of what the new administration is doing is clearly unconstitutional or unlawful. So lawyers bringing lawsuits will be part of preserving the rule of law and adherence to those standards. On a more micro level, though, Jenna, I think the danger here for people that may be listening to this is to get cynical and throw up their hands and say, it just doesn't matter if I vote or if I pay attention. They're all the same. Washington's broken and they withdraw from civic life. That to me is more of a threat to democracy than anger, right? Spasms of violence like we saw at the Capitol or back in Charlottesville. It's really imperative that Americans who are tasked with preserving democracy do their part. And that's everything from participating by voting, educating themselves, talking to their neighbors and their classmates and the people in their circles to try to share experience and find things that connect us rather than divide us. We're a divided country, but we share common values. And if we focus on that, then I think democracy is fine. So I encourage everybody to run toward the problem, not away from it, and take it personally to preserve democracy.
Yeah, going back to that idea of a disengaged citizenry that you bring up in your book.
Right.
One last question to bring some of this back to your book. You know, you also talk about the divide is not left versus right, but those who believe the system is working for them and those who believe the system is not working for them. So how how, if at all, do you think that some of these changes that the Trump administration impact that divide? Because I think that the rhetoric around it is that we're making these changes to cut the waste from government and
Right.
give people the impression that the system is working better for them, when in reality, that might not be the case necessarily.
Look, I think there's a good reason why a lot of people are cynical about the efficacy of government. Um, there are lots of examples of how our elected officials are really not focused on the pressing issues of the day because the system is designed to preserve incumbency because of the way our districts are drawn and campaign money flows largely to incumbents. So I get the cynicism, and I think some attempt to attack that makes sense. I'm not seeing that being attacked, though, right? No one's talking about changing gerrymandering or eliminating the pervasive flow of special interest money into campaign, right? Those are bedrock causes of the dysfunction. Instead, we're talking about eliminating the Department of Education or foreign aid. I mean, that to me is not going to address that fundamental problem of why is it that our elected officials are not addressing gun violence or climate change or immigration. Some people are going to cheer these changes. Other people are going to be directly affected by them. Other people are just going to be angry because they are disinclined to support anything that this president does. So I'm not seeing any steps taken that are going to address that core issue of division, of insider, outsider. I think it's only going to exacerbate that sort of disconnect between those two groups.